Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial's set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us in class today. Brad is engineering the broadcast at GCN in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Listen line is up. 605-477-3249. Debra Brewster is with us, USA Prepares instructor. She lives in Missouri. And I was invited to an event at the Brewster farm. And it was called a tinfoil hat party. There were over 20 of us there, and every one of us was of the preparedness mindset. And I thought before the this broadcast, she and I should talk about what she did, because she is an extraordinary event planner. So she planned this event. We all arrived. We received a tour of the family farm, and then we met each other. And when it's uncomfortable to spend time with someone new, she encouraged us in a very nice way to meet people whom we had never seen before. Okay? So think about, you go to a wedding, and who do you sit with? Well, the people you know. Do you go to a table with people you don't know? Hardly. You always sit with the same people. Well, she wanted us all to meet all of us. And it was really neat the way she did it. Welcome, Debra Brewster.
Good morning, Vince.
Good morning, Debra. And by the way, I was, when you sent me that invitation, over a month prior, I was all excited. I mean, I was really excited. I was looking forward to it. And I think back fondly on your event. What a neat thing you did. And I don't get out much. I really don't. But no matter what, I was not going to miss that event. So in the car, Steve Elkins, broadcaster from Republic Broadcasting, he was at the farm with us during the Christmas days. And John Statmiller, he spent several days with us as well. And so the three of us got in the car. And we went out. Mrs. Finelli was unable to make it, but, she wanted us to go. So, Debra, tell us, why did you have that event?
That is really the most important element of, the whole event in my mind. And obviously, I certainly believe that we are so clearly at the precipice of really our country falling apart. And, that is why, I try to learn, meet people, figure out how life is going to look and how I'm going to respond when things, our government, just life as we know it can no longer be held together. And so I believe in order to better prepare myself and my loved ones, but starting with myself, to be quite honestly, is that I need to figure out all that I can do to plan for these events and, to understand what would increase my chances of survival. And I've always come to the conclusion that no man's an island to themselves, that we really need community. And so there's a lot of points that people focus on. Excuse me. What is the importance of establishing community? And they believe it's about finding and bringing together people with all the right set of skills. And so, just to kind of name some of those skills that people might think they need to have within their group. Maybe they have the leader or the commander, and, they're going to have maybe their communication specialist and their medical triage team, and they're going to have their, scouts, the people that are kind of helping with the peripheral defense, tradesmen, their plumber, their electrician, the cook, the teacher, the pastor, the agriculture specialist, meaning the person's going to grow their food, to the husbandry, who's going to take care of animals if there's animals at the homestead, whatever it may be. And so they focus all their attention on acquiring skills. But what I found is that people, the greatest strength that we have is our individuality and our versatility as human beings. And what I mean by that is that we all have things that we've done in our lifetime. It may not be our occupational things that we mostly identify with, but we all come from different life experiences that will allow us to persevere through many different situations. I'll give you an example. My mother passed when I was 4. So I was raised by my father, who was pretty much just off making money. And he just didn't really have the skill set to effectively nurture. We had 5 girls in our family. So we kind of just, ran our own household. I mean, he was gone probably 12 hours a day working and, of course, part of the day is sleeping. But we had to learn to just kind of function, and we just kind of survived. And that, is just one example. There's so many people that come from so many walks of life. I'll hear people talk about when they live with grandmom and they remember her using a washboard. Or another person may tell me that they didn't have electricity, or maybe they didn't have TV, or they butchered their own animals, or they grew all their own food. So we don't really know the life experiences that may have planted golden nuggets in each of us. And so on the surface, we may see the macho guy that gets up and says, yeah, I'm ex-military, but maybe that person has not really, well, a lot of people are ex-military. That in itself is not exclusively the badge of honor. I mean, it is an honorable thing that they've done to serve our country, but that doesn't mean that they have tremendous skill sets. I know people that are in law enforcement, and maybe they're just given 50 bullets, and they have limited target practice because they don't have the resources in their budget to really allow their officers to really go out and properly train, just because the ammunition cost and things like that. So sometimes we make assumptions that a person is going to have all these very important skill sets and that they're going to be an asset to your group. But what I have learned from just living is, and I had in my life many times large houses. Now the one I have now, it's an average size home, but I've lived in large homes, and my husband worked out of state, so I would sometimes rent out a room just because I couldn't stand being alone all the time. I'm a very light sleeper, and I just wasn't sleeping well. And so in doing that, I've had different opportunities over a long period of time to see other people and even in work situations to see how people respond. And, sometimes what I have found a lot of times is that until you really get around people and you really spend time, you may not realize that they have some deep principles and things that they'll fight for and things that they've been through. And then other times they're very superficial and they don't have the character it's not someone that you're going to be able to live with, or even you don't like being around. Now, part of having a group is that a lot of times people think that you have to like everybody that you're with, and of course they have to possess all these skills. But in reality, think about it. People go to work. They may work in a factory, and they produce a service or whatever the case may be, and they get along. And because they have to, they have a common one purpose. And they set aside all these things. And they may not really have a chance that they're going to shine and stuff, and we may not get to deeply know them. But all of these things weigh on my thought process. Like, if I'm with them for an extended time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for possibly years, one, yes, we can function because we're disciplined and the circumstances dictate a certain behavior. But at the same time, I need to be able to know a little bit about people's personality, what drives them, what's their history, what's going to motivate them. Are they going to fall apart under pressure? Are they going to rise to that occasion? And it's for these kind of reasons that I take the time. I invest my energy. I mean, I don't know anybody that does an event that doesn't put a lot of effort on the front end preparing for that event. Even though, like, let's say we had a potluck, and I'll tell people to bring stuff because they need to learn to contribute. They need to learn to carry their weight. It's not because I didn't have 5 refrigerators and freezers that I could have easily pulled anything, and I was prepared on a drop of the dime if there was a deficiency to make sure that I put stuff out that there was more than enough to accommodate the group. But it was to really see how people come, if they're willing in the best of times to get out. Maybe it was a little cold, and come and participate so that, one, they could size me up and I could size them up, but also so that we could perhaps have an opportunity to dig and learn more about each other. And most people, they want it easy. They want the obvious, okay, that person's the marksman and, he's the ex-military, he's in our group. It's an automatic entrance pass. And yet, they don't know that person could have been, a psychopath. They could be coming out with PTSD and be totally not stable. They could lose it. So we have to really weigh all these different issues.
Debra Brewster's with us. What a brilliant description of how it is, Debra, and the group, the village, the team. You're absolutely correct. And you came up with a list of questions that you asked everyone to consider talking about, just kind of in a round-robin format. But you had a bell, and the first person was given this bell and would ring the bell. That would mean, okay, next, this person is going to speak, and when finished, the next person got the bell and would ring the bell and would talk about what? Well, number 1 was the first name of that person. Number 2 was the current or past main occupation, meaning skill set. 3, what do you believe is the next big event to prepare for? I mean, what do you think is coming? Number 4, are you a pre-tribulation saint or expect to go through the tribulation? Number 5, are you emergency planning with a small community, neighbors, or family only? Number 6, how many people are in your group? And number 7, the last question, would you take in a prepper friend who lost everything? And I think the answers, when people described who they were, what their thoughts were, each person took maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and it was riveting. You could hear a pin drop in the room because the attention was focused on the individual who was speaking. Everybody was really interested in that, and of course I was as well. Debra, what was your takeaway from that, what you heard? Because some of the things that I knew probably close to half of the people who were at that tinfoil hat party of yours, because they had been coming to some of them had been coming to the meetups in Springfield for years, the meetups that we hosted. What was your takeaway?
Well, one thing that really surprised me, or I guess it shouldn't have, was to realize that how many people really don't feel prepared for what is to come. And what I mean by that, they haven't been able to bridge the gap, even within their own family unit, to be on the same page to prepare collectively together. And I'm going to give you the example. One of the individuals, and it really shocked, I think, everybody more than any response we had to any question. When that person said, I forget which question it was that triggered it, but they indicated that they felt that at some point they were going to have to flee their home and that they would be having to leave their spouse. Now, they've been married, I believe, well over 30, 35 years or so, that their spouse has made it so clear that they're not going to prep. They apparently just think it's crazy, I have to assume, and they're just not going to fight. That they're just going to stay where they're at, and whatever happens, happens. But just almost that they didn't feel that they were going to change anything about their life to prepare them for what it was ahead. And it blew everybody away. This person said, I'm going to have to leave my spouse. And the person honestly said, what am I to do? And that's a tall order. In fact, I asked my husband later that same question. And he says, well, I'm going to just stay with you if that's it, if you're just not going to go. But the difference is my husband knows, and we have been preparing collectively together for, I don't know, a good solid 7 or 8 years. And, he's just much more of a nurturing type of person. But I also think of myself, if my husband just wasn't willing to flee and that's it, boy, I do love him, but, I choose life. And I guess if I lost everything else, my children and everything else, perhaps maybe I might just say, okay, that's it. We're just going to take it as the chips come. But, if I see 20 people approaching my property with high-powered rifles or whatever the case may be, and I know, what, party's over. It's not looking good. My tendency is to want to move on and to survive.
Well, I'm in total agreement. And I remember that person speaking very well. And then when it was my turn, I was second to last. I had an exclamation point to put on that. Debra Brewster's with us. And Debra, you're talking about your tinfoil hat party, and when we all heard this kind of a message, and the message was that when times get tough, a husband may have to leave his wife purely because of value differences, not because they would be separating where one person would go one way and the other person another way, and the plan would be to meet up later, but just purely because of value differences. What's the use in fighting? What's the use in persevering? Let's just give up. That kind of a thing. Well, back in Virginia, we had a company that manufactured computers, Mrs. Finelli and I and the children. And a woman customer came in and she said, how can you and Mrs. Finelli work together all the time? She said she couldn't do it. And she said that she and her husband take separate vacations because they'd kill each other if they spent too much time together. My jaw dropped. I couldn't believe that. The reason that I married Mrs. Finelli is because she's my best friend. She's the one I want to spend the most time with. And that's just the way it is. And I know that's the way it is with you and your husband, Debra. But to put an exclamation point on what I just said, at your tinfoil hat party when it was my turn to speak and I was second to last, I told the story about how I met this man, and I knew him for years. And he was a high-ranking person in a government kind of job. But he was the number one guy. He was the top in this particular government, local government organization. And he turned to me and he said, Vincent, I may have to shoot some of my family members when things get bad. And what he meant was because they didn't get it, because they wouldn't cooperate, because they wouldn't work together, because they would not be a team, because they would be disruptive, because he couldn't trust them to do what they said they would do. All of the above. Because they would be wasteful, because they would squander hard-saved, hard-earned resources, all the above. And he wasn't kidding. And so that just put an exclamation point on what we heard by one of the people at your tinfoil hat party. It was a real eye-opener, as you said. And many people haven't thought about that. They haven't thought about exactly what you said. Just because someone is ex-military, that they're going to be great. They may be unstable, as you mentioned. Absolutely true.
And it's like with that individual, I have sisters that happen to live out of state. We so venomously disagree with each other on every life issue there is that I don't even want them to know where my home is. Now, reality, I guess if they're smart enough, they could really attempt it. But I believe in a second they would sell me out to some FEMA camp or my resources or go check here. You might find this provision. Trust is so critical. And that's the purpose why I get together with people. I've got to figure them out. They got to figure me out. And maybe nothing will ever come of it. Maybe we'll perhaps just barter with each other. But that in itself could mean the difference of surviving and not surviving. Now, of course, I have a bigger objective. I want to know, are any of these people someone that they could be a contingency plan B for me, or I might be a plan B for them? The problem in America is that we are very individualistic. And so we always want to go off and do our own thing. And so it's very hard overall for us to come together. Even think about it in the professional world. What do doctors do if they have, the reality, nobody thinks of it this way, a deficiency in one area? They become a specialist so that therefore they don't have to try to plug their holes in their deficiencies and they can just focus on their strength. But in reality, we all have deficiencies. And so to survive, we need to learn to plug our deficiencies. Yes, we have strengths and we have to put certain things in place. I know, very quite honestly, I have a leadership skill within me. And I have logistic capabilities and organizational capabilities. And thank God we have resources that have already been mobilized to allow for survival. I'm not saying against every odds, but I know I don't have the community. I don't have a tribe. Yes, I pray my family makes it here. They've got very well-rounded skill sets. But what if not? And what if, I get compromised and I have to go some other place? Now, not only I have a place out of state because my husband works out of state, I've got to keep that fortified with plenty of provisions from protection and food and every other thing, and a game plan with my husband, how quickly we have to respond to upheaval and to mobilize ourselves together again. But also it's a contingency, it's a drop point for my kids on their way to my home as well. But at the same time, I could be in this fight alone if he doesn't make it here, depending on if it's a high-altitude weapon or something. He may never make it home. We have to know how we plug the deficiencies, the areas that we're not strong, who we can trust. Again, I think we have to mingle with our neighbors, too. Generally, when I do these events, I do them about 3 times a year. The neighbors come, too, because, I need to kind of know them. They got to know who I am. I got to kind of know who they are. Because when it gets down to the end, there is strength in numbers, but you must also know who fits what role and how they will function and keep that group cohesively together.
Yeah, and Debra, you know, one of the questions that you asked, the last question, number 7, would you take in a prepper friend who lost everything? That was quite interesting to me. What was your take on that? What would you take in a prepper friend who lost everything?
The biggest thing I heard people say is, well, it depends. And I think that it depends, I assume, on, in reality, how much provisions they have. Do they feel that that person could add value, an additional person for manual labor, an additional person for security? But if they felt that religiously or, for different purposes that they don't feel comfortable with that person, they wouldn't take them in. I'll tell you, I go to a few different meetup groups that meet randomly, and there was one gentleman that went to church on Saturday. He was what we call a Sabbath worshiper, and so he doesn't eat what's called the unclean meat, rabbit, pork, things like that. Now, I put a pond in my property that I stock in. I've got catfish, and I have rabbits that I'm breeding because they reproduce meat, and it just becomes one additional provision that's available. Now, I've never eaten the rabbits, and I've never eaten the fish. But I said, whether I think it's clean or unclean, I'm going to eat whatever I have to do to survive. If it's bugs. But they're like, oh, you can't be, how could you basically consider yourself, Christian or whatever, because they had a strong constitution about clean meats and unclean meats. And yet, it's, again, how they interpret things. So these are things can separate us that we wouldn't even anticipate. And yet I saw this same person at this meetup rip apart another person who I consider highly trustworthy, extremely knowledgeable, and it was because they objected that when this person sent out an email broadcast, there were too many people on his email broadcast, so they felt this person lacked being discriminant. And I know this person. He communicates with like-minded people, and he's knowledgeable, and he's always willing to help and share and carry his weight and brings a lot of valuable information. So you just don't know. Now, that person wasn't at our meetup that we had, the tinfoil hat party, but it's just symbolic that there's all different factors that are going to make it, unbearable to cohabitate with people. And, maybe I'm going to be forced to out of pure survival, but I do want to stack the odds that I can, reasonably get through this and keep my sanity. And so, taking people in, my feeling is I've got land. You have obviously way more land than I have, but I could have people come. But you know what? You better come with your travel trailer, your tent, your food, your provisions, your protection. If you're preparing, you should never flee where you have nothing. You should have prepared to mobilize resources off-site. You have to always think of all these things. You must plan. You must do everything possible, to survive, and that means plan A, plan B, plan C. People have to wake up and start. You have to do these things. It's a matter of life or death. And so when that gentleman said he was going to choose life. Now, maybe he might change in the heat when it comes down to it, and he may just decide, I'm not going to flee, the one with his spouse. But I think we owe it to humanity to choose life. And sometimes we're going to have terrible choices, but we have to choose life. And, I don't know what else to say.
Well, I've got a comment about that. When I started speaking, I asked the question, how many of you have cell phones? It was probably the first or second thing I said before my name. And And everyone's hand went up, except one person said, I don't. And I said, okay, that's two of us. So here we have a whole room full of people, and they're dependent on their cell phones. They're going to a meeting to discuss private things, and yet they brought their broadcast system with them, their personal tracking system with them, to share with whoever may be listening in what their deepest, most private thoughts are about preparedness. They could not leave their cell phone home. They had them with them. Got another couple comments when we come back. Debra Brewster's with us. We're talking about things that just are not discussed. Debra Brewster's with us. And so, Debra, I remember when it was my turn to speak toward the end, I said to the group, wow, this is the most impressive group of people I've met since I crashed an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Do you remember me saying that?
That's so true.
And now, I am not an alcoholic, but I did crash one because I wanted to see if I could find someone to come on the air with us and talk about Alcoholics Anonymous, because I think it's a wonderful organization. Well, what I learned is this group of people that you had, and I really meant it, they are an extremely bright group of people. But we had so many differing opinions and values that and each person was kind of like a leader. Okay? So you had a whole room. Well, most of us were leaders, right? So there you'd have problems right away. Like, who was in charge? That'd be a huge problem, because you had ex-military, you had people who are in business for themselves, people who really know how to do things. You had a medical professional there. So it was very interesting. And when it got to, would you take in a prepper friend who lost everything, that was extremely interesting to me. And I apologized for losing some friends before I started, what I had to say. And I said no. I said no, I wouldn't, because after teaching people for 7 years, if they weren't prepared, I can't help them. I just can't, because we've been preaching this for 7 years. But I did say, in the case of someone who was really prepared, someone who tried but was overrun, by another team, I would. And I meant it. But really, you and I have been teaching in person, on the radio, separately, together. We've been teaching people to prepare. But so few think that they need to prepare. They think everything's going to be okay. And
that's even part of, doing this get-together. People, when you join a group, people say, well, what's it going to cost? Because there are groups that have costs. Your membership dues you got to pay, and you got to, meet all these requirements. But with the type of people that I mingle with, we don't have any direct cost. But other than you're going to have to invest your time. You're going to have to get in your car, spend the gasoline to get there. You're going to have to contribute. And you also have to be able to, the expense is to take care of yourself, to carry your own weight. And that's why I said I ask people to bring something. One, it makes it more interesting, the food selection, but because people have got to learn to carry their weight, to make a contribution, to make a sacrifice. And a lot of people, when they choose groups, of course we choose groups that reinforce our views, our beliefs, things that we already hold, like the Alcoholics Anonymous group. They go to each other because they understand each other. And, that's what keeps them cohesive and going along. However, that being said, for that which is ahead, we're going to have to broaden our net, broaden those people, and it's a matter of figuring out, who can I live with here? Who would I take in? When we say, well, I got to think about it under certain conditions, they're qualifiers. And so this is all part of that practice, getting to know people that you're with, and, to figure these things out, to really even codify your own thinking, what your own beliefs are, and really where you're coming from. And then, of course, to be open that if you need a correction in your attitude, if you're not thinking clearly, that you get feedback. You're open to another narrative, another opinion to stretch, if it makes sense what they're saying. So getting together, even though it's for entertainment, it also has to be to grow intellectually, spiritually, in all, to be a complete contributing human being.
Debra Brewster, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a great week.
You too. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Hour number 2, Smart Meter Dangers with Joe Esposito. Website is StopSmartMetersInOklahoma.org. Welcome, Joe Esposito.
Hey, class. Hey, Vince. How are you guys? Did you have a nice holiday?
Yeah. And, I've decided that I needed to have a New Year's resolution and, to not be so hard on myself. And what I mean by that is instead of bottling it up, biting my lip, I'm just going to let it out. So
that's good. Yeah, you don't need any more stress.
Joe, I was looking at your website and I clicked on a link on your website, and it talks about advanced metering with smart meters. And in 2008, this PDF shows that the top states for smart meter penetration, and it looks like the electric cooperatives were really big in deploying these smart meters. Now, for example, Missouri, 13%, Arkansas, 13%, Oklahoma, 7%, Nebraska, 20%, Idaho, 16%, Pennsylvania, 15%, Maine, 14%. And the amazing thing to me is that they pulled it off. They literally pulled this off while people were sleeping. They changed their meters. And here's what the big concern to me is. So let's say you live in a neighborhood and you go, you know what? I don't want to participate in this. I don't want a smart meter. And you live in one of those neighborhoods where you have 1/8 of an acre. And so you put some solar panels on your roof. It's perfectly positioned for off-grid. You get your battery bank, your inverter, and you're good to go in your own mind. But you're in the middle of a storm of electromagnetic radiation from all your neighbors who are blasting you with electromagnetic radiation from their smart meters. Is that true?
Correct. Absolutely correct. Absolutely. Go ahead with your thought.
So it's darn near impossible to avoid this. So some people, probably most people would say, well, what's the use in fighting? They're all around us everywhere we go. They're in the malls. They're in apartment complexes. They're in stores. They're deploying wireless communications in these houses anyway. What's the big deal? To me, it is a big deal. To me, I'm not interested in being part of this. And that's one of the reasons why I live in the middle of nowhere, because I want to be as far away from it as possible. But the alleged functions of these smart meters, here are some things that people don't think about. If the electric utility company, whether it be a cooperative or a for-profit corporation, they can shut off the electricity remotely to your business or your home. They can go to a keyboard and they can say, kill the power to that guy. Boom. You're disconnected. They don't have to have somebody come out to your house. They can do it right from some of these meters. Is that correct?
Correct. You're right. They have automatic shutoffs. But let me just share. Let me back you up just a little bit. The big deal about all this, it's everywhere. There's no question about that. If you have a meter like mine, you can just walk out any door of your house and start reading it. But the big deal is there's serious health damages caused by this radiation. And that's what's been ignored by the military and ignored by the telecoms and the utilities. There's I've right now I've got maybe 12 documents available that shows all about the lies and misrepresentation of these different organizations, like Anthony B. Miller, who advises the World Health Organization, came out last year and said that any wireless from any source, okay, so you can stop and think about all the thousands of sources, causes health-damaging cancer development and cancer promotion. Are you listening, class? This wireless from any source causes cancer development and cancer promotion. This is new science. I mean, the science is caught up with the crooks, okay? And let me just preface the things I'm saying. So what I'm talking to about the class today is what I believe to be truth from the work I've done based on science, okay? So that's what I'm all about, because I've been at this going on 7 years now. And the big deal is, if you look at the documents that I'm now emailing out to folks, George Carlo, he was in charge. He's a lawyer, epidemiologist. He was the front guy for the telecoms to bring this in to the public in 96. And there was a documentary by Sabine El-Jamal. She did a 4.5-year documentary called Generation Zapped. You can look it up. And in that 74 minutes is George Carlo. And he's kind of sprinkled through there explaining what happened with how all this came about, how we got all this microwave radiation. And so I got a hold of her and said, can I get a transcript of your documentary? And she said, sure. And so the reason I wanted it was not per se for her, but for his. And so I pulled out his transcript, and unless you read physically what he's saying, you won't understand. He tells you, like in 84, the military were the only people that had wireless. When they brought it into the country, there was no pre-testing. There was nothing done about health issues. They just brought it in. And the FDA and the EPA did the exact same thing. They gave it a free pass. And this is George Carlo's own words. He said, we felt, that's F-E-L-T, well, felt. There is no science with felt, right? It was safe. So this whole wireless debacle has been perpetrated on the American public, and it's frying everybody now. Listen to what Anthony B. Miller is saying. Cancer development and cancer promotion. What's happening? So let me just share what, and then there's Jerry Flynn in documents that I have. He was 26 years microwave radiation warfare expert. He's telling you that there is not any amount of wireless radiation that's safe. And he goes into all that. And so I have those documents available. I can email out to people, if they'd want to call to get those from me. But you don't know about this because I haven't had time to talk to you about it, Vince, but I was thinking about putting my house on the market, and see where I live, it's very hot. That means there's a lot of radiation. Like out in the country, when you go out and take my meter out there, the radiation might be 5 or 10 microwatts per meter squared, or like 0.1 microwatts. where I live, it's 10 to 15,000 microwatts. It's just astronomically high. So the whole cancer development, cancer promotion thing's big. And so I kind of typed up 4 pages and put my house on the market. So I'm talking about the house in the country. We live kind of on 2.5 acres in this little area, and we're kind of isolated out there. It's been there since the 70s on 2.5 acres. So you have barns and chickens, and you can have cows and goats. And I had a 7,000 square foot mineralized garden. And so it says asking price. Okay, so here's what I wrote. Will be depend and decided upon after the receipt of reparations from AEPPSO, that's the utility here, electric utility, ONG, which is the natural gas, St. John's Hospital, because they have a communications tower on top of theirs, and American Tower Corporation, which is on 96th Street, which they have 6 layers of panels on. They keep putting bigger ones on. This house right now is not safe for anybody to live in because the massive amount of man-made, non-ionizing, non-thermal pulsed microwave radiation going through the house. This stuff goes through your homes. If you're in view of a cell tower, that is for sure going through your home. And so I talk about something has to be done to change our home for making the residents safe. Well, I can't live in my home any longer because of the high amounts of microwave radiation that's coming in on us. And so, I go on to talk about it, about what I'm saying. And then I talked about the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission on one of the pages. And, I went to them 2 years ago. Charlotte Slavosky, she was the executive director of it. And I presented her with this information. She was interested, so I drove down to Oklahoma City. I live, up around Tulsa, Owasso, and presented this information to her. And I went to her office, second floor. She's facing the north, glass windows, and it was coming in huge amount of radiation. So she kind of plopped down in the chair and was just astonished at the amount of radiation once you show it to her. See, people don't have a meter to read this stuff. And so she never talked to me since.
So, Joe Esposito, you mentioned cell towers. If you can see the cell tower, you have electromagnetic radiation, microwave radiation coming through your house. And here's the absolute proof of this, class. So, if you turn on an AM radio in your house and you get reception, well, those radio waves are coming through your house, electromagnetic radiation. How about FM radio? Same thing. How about if you have over-the-air television and you can receive that with an antenna in your house? Well, you've got television wavelengths coming through your house. How about if you have a cell phone? Does it work in your house? Well, you've just proven that you have microwave radiation in your house from the cell tower and from your phone back to the cell tower. How about Wi-Fi? Does that work in your house? How about these new cordless phones? Well, then some of them aren't even new. Some of them have been around since the 70s. Do they work in your house? Well, if you have any of those things, for starters, you have been exposed to massive amounts of electromagnetic radiation. No question about it. Joe, your thoughts?
No, what you just said is absolutely right. And this radiation is cumulative. It keeps working on the body. If you go to bed at night and it's coming through your walls, or you got devices around you all the time, you can't sleep. Your body will not repair. Okay. People have believed falsely that all this has been tested and it's all safe. It's not. That's what I'm trying to show the public. We now have the science. We now have the documents to show this was brought to the American public. Okay? And remember what George Carlos said. We felt it was safe. And he goes on in his the transcript that I have He says, some reports of studies were so severe that had there been pre-testing for cell phones would have never made it to the market. We would never had wireless. But that wasn't to be because they covered it all up. They knew about the damages in 1971 for sure. A Navy military document, 2,300 studies they had done on this type of radiation. There's 5 pages of health symptoms. Okay? There's Martin Paul. He did a letter to Jerry Brown, the governor, last year when they were looking at 5G, which is going to fry everybody, all right? When that comes out, it's millimeter radiation. But Martin Paul, he's a scientist. He's not an electrical engineer. He's not some utility dupe that says, well, this is just a little bit of radiation. They all say that, and they misrepresent the science that was used about the power of cell phones versus smart meters. But Martin Paul's telling you that every one of your cells has voltage-gated calcium channels. Those open and close with the body's a little bit of electricity at each cell to control the environment of your cells to keep you healthy. The radiation causes 7.2 million times more power, and they overpower the cells, which is screwing up everybody's calcium. That's why Anthony B. Miller's coming out and is trying to tell the public that today, his press release came out 18 August 2017, says any wireless, wireless is raw electricity, causes cancer development and cancer promotion. It's caught up. So I don't think we can keep doing this if we want to live normal and healthy anymore.
Okay, I've got a couple thoughts on that. So, Joe, for those who may be asking, are you being paid to say what you're saying, to speak out against smart meters and electromagnetic radiation? Or are you doing this as a volunteer?
Vince, I started all this because AEP PSO went to the city of Owasso and struck a deal with the city to make Owasso the pilot back. And let's see, I started this November 7th, 2012, so they had to do it about a year before that, maybe 2011. I told them I didn't want any of this stuff on my house, yet they came and put it on. And so I've been fighting it ever since as I got sick.
There you go. Joe Esposito's with us. Stop Smart Meters in Oklahoma.org. Joe, the reason I asked you if you were being paid is I wanted the class to hear in your own words that you're not doing this looking for money. No one here at USA Prepares, not me, not any other instructor, gets paid for being on the air. We do this because we're passionate about the subject, about teaching, about the topics that we discuss, and we're willing to share them free of charge from us. Yeah. And I wanted to say this as well. So I was talking to, we'll call him a neighbor, but he's a couple miles down the road. And I said to him, so how you doing? He said, well, I'm really sick. He was dying sick. I mean, literally, he was almost dead. And I said, you got a cell tower just across the road from you, a little up on that hill over there. And he said, yeah, I wanted that cell tower. I gave my wife, this is what he said, his words, I gave my wife $500 to go bribe that guy to put the cell tower on my farm so he could get the revenue from the cell tower rather than having his neighbor get the revenue. And what these telephone companies do is they will pay for the use of that land per month, and then for 20 years or so. And then at the end of that contract, that tower stays up. It's obsolete, and then you have to figure out how you're going to get it down if you want it down. That's what happens. Well, he died. He died.
Wow.
But he wanted that tower. Now, there are people who are so greedy that they will kill their neighbors and their families for the pursuit of money. When I moved to Virginia, we bought this farm. There was nothing there. Kind of like in Missouri. It was rural Virginia. And all of a sudden, there was a cell tower across the road from us. And so I went to the county, we'll call him the county commissioner. It was actually the county administrator, that's what it's called. And I said, yo, what's up with that tower? Who gave the permission for that? And he goes, well, I was your neighbor. Your neighbor owned that land, and he rents it out to the cell company, and they put that tower up. So he gets paid every month. And I said, I don't like it. Who approved it? And he said, Vinny, you got a tractor, right? I said, yeah. And he said, well, hook up your tractor to it and pull it down. That's what
I'm sorry.
Well, that obviously would have landed me in the clink for a really long time.
Correct.
Okay. So my stupid neighbor, I hope he's listening, decided that he was going to, for the pursuit of money and his own individual greed, allowed that cell tower to be put up on his property. And then there was another stupid neighbor a couple miles down the road who did the same thing. They put one up right on their property, several hundred feet from their house.
Wow.
Great. I'll bet they get great cell reception there. What a bozo. Now, these people who I'm talking about in Virginia would be considered the pillars of the community. I would say, those are their words, pillars of community. I use the word village. But these are the people that you look up to. You know, the teacher, the owner of the real estate business in town, of which there's one or two. So you see these people all the time, and you think they must know what they're doing, and they're ignorant. And these are the people who are doing it. Because if you didn't have stupid neighbors and greedy neighbors, you wouldn't have cell towers in your village. Churches are renting out the steeples. Why? Because they're already up there and you can't see the cell towers inside the steeples. They put them on water towers. They put them on top of buildings, the highest buildings in town. It's unbelievable. And people think that's progress. Now, how many of you know that one X-ray's got some risks associated with it, 2 has got more, 10 has got more? Who goes in and says, you know what, I think I ought to get an X-ray every day? Who does that? Nobody. Because you know it's a killer. It's not a killer this minute, but over time, it's a killer. And that's what's going on with these wireless communications devices. When we built our house here in Missouri, I wired the whole house, telephone connections in every room. Now, that means all I have to do is plug in a corded landline. And it works. But you can go to Sam's Club or Walmart or Best Buy, and you can buy these cordless phones. You have one jack, and you can have cordless phones throughout your house, and they work. But you're being slowly cooked. For what? The convenience of just idle chatter on the phone? People have lost their minds. And it doesn't just impact you, because if you live in a neighborhood and your house is 50 feet away from your neighbor's house, you can walk over to your neighbor's house with your cordless phone in your pocket, and it still works. How's that possible? Because you're being cooked. Joe Esposito, I'm livid. I'm furious. I just can't believe the enormous amount of stupidity that blankets our country.
Well, Vince, I don't know if it's stupidity. I haven't really gone there, but the bigger thing is they don't know, and they've trusted the public, the government, the legislators to see that all this was particularly safe. And what I'm trying to tell the class and the public is that because of the documents, we can now show that the science is saying this is causing cancer development and cancer promotion, and we can show that was brought into the public without any kind of safety testing. There still has never been any safety testing, and they keep pushing it down our throats, and more and more. Vince, just look at the cell towers right now. In my area, there used to be maybe one set of panels up high. Now there's 3 sets of panels on the things. The panels they're replacing the old panels with, I mean, I don't go up there and measure those things, but I can see a man working up there, and the panels are twice the size of a man. I mean, it's amazing. They keep increasing and more increasing all the time. That's why we can't live in our house any longer, because I'm one of the guys I was in Marines. I was affected by all this because I worked on a radar at the end of a runway, landing aircraft, precision approach. And so, remember, it's cumulative. So I got hit with a lot of it, and so that's why I'm so sensitive. And I have to wear like a $2,000 suit to when I go out in the public to protect myself. Because at the house we were in, we can't any longer raise any crops in our 7,000 square foot garden. Can't, raise your own cattle anymore. You can't keep bees because it kills the bees and the other animals. You can't work in your yard anymore. So I have a piece of property I can't do anything with except sit there, and I can't even look at it, really, because I can't be around the place. I mean, this is insanity to be damaging our health like this and thinking they're going to get away with it.
Joe Esposito, I was talking with a man who just came off the roof of a home, and he just installed a Hughes internet satellite dish on this family's roof.
Okay.
And I told him, I said, I have a friend who was in the Vietnam War, and he was in communications. And before he went into town for a good time when he was on leave, he would sit on the feed horn of a satellite antenna to scramble his sperm so that he would, not create any offspring. That's how dangerous this is. Just sit on the feed horn for a couple of minutes. That was his belief.
Wow.
I think he was right. I think he was right on the money. But here's what happened. So I told that story to the guy who was the technician who came off the roof installing this small dish antenna, kind of like a DirecTV size antenna. He said, oh, yeah, we're not allowed to be in front of that antenna for more than 6 minutes per year.
Oh, wow.
6 minutes per year. Okay, that's what he told me that he was told during training by the company Hughes Satellite. 6 minutes per year in front of the antenna. Walking around on the roof, installing the antenna. 6 minutes a year. So, class, if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what does. Joe, have you heard that before?
Well, I've dealt with satellites lately, and just from my experience with radars, that feed horn that people put, they put a dish on their house, that feed horn, you can't tell me that feed horn is exactly the circumference of that antenna. So it's got to be skewing more out the sides into the house that people are in.
Joe Esposito's with us, and Joe, there are three common expressions that are used in the state of Missouri. One of them is, "It'll be all right." That's what's used when you don't tie down a load on your pickup truck or trailer. You know, it's not going to go flying off. It'll be all right. Another one is, "Well, it's good enough for the girls we run with." And the third expression is, "I never thought about that." And that's when a person stands with their hands on their hips and they look at the flood from the water heater in their house. Okay? I never thought about that. That's why I use the word stupid. There are things that I can't believe. You know, you put water in a steel tank and you expect it's never going to leak. You expect that, you know, you put that load on your trailer and, you know, it's not going to fall off when you hit a bump. Heck, no, that's going to be fine. And it's good enough for the girls we run with, which means, you know, they have, it's demeaning to the ladies, but what they really mean is, it's poor quality. It's not straight. It's not plumb. It doesn't line up, but it's good enough for them. Well, I object to that because their ignorance is harming me and everyone around me. So here's the question. Joe, have you experimented with trying to reduce electromagnetic radiation from smart meters? Do you know of any technologies that work? Because you've got the meter to prove whether they do or don't work. Can you share any thoughts with us about that, or would you prefer not to?
No, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. That's why you got the meters. That's why I tell people to buy the meters, because it's so serious. This is so serious, life and death. And the meter I use is like, I have nothing to do with the prices or making money from meters. I get them from a company up in Canada. They're $734. And I tell people that meter is going to be nothing cost-wise to your health damages that you're going to have to put up with. And you may die from all this. And so, yes, we have people paying anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 to get the meter off their house and off their property so they don't get radiated with microwave radiation. That's probably the best thing to do. It's very hard. You know, these meters can be on the other side of a wall of your head in your bedroom. It's very hard to block the meters. I worked with a meter up north of Edmond where the meter was on the outside of the house. It was at the bathroom, and the bedroom stuck out about 6 feet past the house, further to the north. And I used 2 plates of 1/4-inch plate steel and other materials. I didn't ever touch the meter. I just put it alongside, 6 inches away, just to try to block the radiation. And that stuff goes right through it. This is one thing most people don't understand when you work with this stuff, and I do, because I've worked with it, is the closer you are to the source, the more powerful it is and harder to stop. If you're at a distance, like, half a mile or a mile, you can build a Faraday cage out of aluminum screen wire, metal aluminum screen wire, and it'll usually block it. It's just really hard. And people think, well, it's just coming out the front. Well, I was looking at a house for a fellow that he was going to buy, and it was up in Monkey Island. It was a Grand Lake, kind of like a resort place, and we were walking through with the real estate guy, and the breakers were turned off in the house, and I had my meter on, but the smart meter's still working outside. It's still transmitting every few seconds, and so as we walked through that house, with no electricity, you could hear the meter transmitting every little bit. People don't understand. This is difficult to try to stop this stuff.
Joe, I'm going to call the company where you bought your detection meter. Who are they?
Safe Living Technologies in Canada.
Safe Living
Technologies. Yeah. And you want an HFE 35C.
HFE 35C.
There's meters that look like it. They're half the price, but I'm telling you, they're the most easy to use, and it lets you know what you're listening to while you're doing it. I've done it for 7 years.
Joe, we're out of time.